Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello, listeners. This is your host, Andy Curry. Welcome to our show today, folks. I am really excited because I have professional speaker with me, Walter Bond, who has been speaking professionally for 15 years, and he speaks on peak performance, and he also has a coaching program on peak performance. Walter has spoken not only in the U.S., but all over the world. He is based out of Florida. He has 3 books. The first one is called All Butts Stink, and I want to make sure you clarify that it's not B-U-T-T-S, it's B-U-T''S. That's an important distinction. The second one is Think, Execute, Dominate. The last one is Off Season for Financial Advisors. Walter, welcome to the show.
Andy, it's my pleasure to be here with you today.
Walter, we're fired up to have you with us today. I've been excited to speak with you about your information. And what I'm really interested in is your 31 truths to boost peak performance. Let's talk about that. What is the 31 truths about?
Well, Andy, one thing I learned is that, most of us speakers and trainers who got into training and development had a previous life. And my previous life was very unique. Played professional basketball for 8 years. I got a chance to play for the Dallas Mavericks, Utah Jazz, Detroit Pistons, played in Europe, played in, Italy, Greece, and Germany. And in my career and journey to the NBA, I didn't realize at the time that I was, really becoming an expert in development. And when I left the industry of sports, my wife and I launched a training and development company. I couldn't divorce myself from my basketball background. And if you think about it, in sports, we have a lot of talented athletes who sometimes underperform and don't reach their potential. And so it's obvious that talent is only a part of the equation. And so when talent is not the entire equation, there's some other variables that have an impact on us all reaching our potential. And to sum it up, how we operate as people really makes a difference. So when I think about sports, and, Michael Jordan is a billionaire now in business because he operates the right way. And so since he operated the right way and thinks the right way, he not only became a Hall of Fame basketball player, he had success after sports. If you turn to the business world and look at all of our successful entrepreneurs with Starbucks and Facebook and Tesla, these successful business people are talented. But there's a lot of talented business people who are in debt and filed bankruptcy 17 times. So the question is, whether you're an athlete or a business person, we have to make sure we operate the right way. And the analogy that I use is that we all try to update our cell phone when we need to, and we always want to update the software in our computer. Why? Because we want to make sure they operate, as best they can. But here's my challenge. When's the last time, a person started to update themselves, and if I want my phone to operate and my software on my computer to operate, I have to update. There's nothing more important in my world than to update me. So my 31 truths to boost peak performance, is a training that I made that is very, it really is different. We have leadership trainings and we have customer service trainings, and, there's a lot of trainings that have been, created through the years, but this training really gets down to the core of the person. And, you ask yourself the question, why is some people a manager and some people a CEO? The only difference is that CEO operates better. And since they operate better, they've been able to get promoted through the ranks in corporate America. So, anyone listening today, hopefully is motivated to know that maybe I'm a manager today, but I can operate better. And, next thing I can be a president. So the 31 truths to boost peak performance really gets down to the core of how we all operate as humans. And this impacting people in middle school, all the way up to the boardroom, because it's fundamental, it's indigenous to who we are. And the only thing that separates us as athletes and business people, parents and spouses is basically how we operate. And so if you're ever unhappy with your life, all you need to do is make sure you go and update who you are and how you operate.
I've watched some of your videos online, and I saw some, I believe, on your website, and it's fascinating to watch you to speak to folks. You got a lot of energy, and one of my questions is, when you talk about updating cell phones and computers and such, why don't we update ourselves? Can you give some examples of, like, your first recommendation of how to update yourself, and where should you start?
Well, again, I'm a former athlete, and in sports, during the game, you kind of stick to what you do well because you're competing. You don't take any risk. You don't try anything you can't do, because in the midst of competition, you're going to kind of stick to your guns because you're trying to win. And so in sports, though, we have what we call our off season, right? And so you compete for 7 months, and then you get 5 months off. And in the off season, you don't work in your business, you work on your business. You lose 10 pounds, you gain 10 pounds, you improve your left hand, you work on your curved ball, you work on your, hitting off the tee, whatever sport you're in your off season, you work at your work. And so when I left sports and got into corporate America and training and development, I tried to live the corporate life, but in 3 years' time, I got stale, I got frustrated, I just started feeling unengaged, and I couldn't realize what was going on. And then one day I woke up and I tapped my wife on the shoulder, and I was like, babe, I need an off season. And she was like, what? I said, I need an off season so that I can get bigger, stronger, and faster, if you will. And so we've created this off-season concept. We have off-season trainings. We have off-season retreats where we teach entrepreneurs and business professionals how to facilitate their own personal off-season to get that exponential growth and improvement that sometimes you see in an athlete. One thing about sports, we recognize athletes as the best in the world at what they do, but think about it. We have an off-season built in. There's a sabbatical built into our lifestyle and industry as an athlete that allows us to not work in our business all the time, but to work on our business. And typically an athlete who works on their business comes back bigger, stronger, and faster that next season. In fact, they always give out an award called the most improved player. How about the most improved company? How about the most improved CEO? How about the most improved VP of sales? See, I think the same exponential growth is available to business people if we only indoctrinate the concept that athletes have benefited from for years. After those 3 years, my wife and I began to take off seasons. We began to evaluate everything in our company. What do we need to do to operate better as professionals? And Andy, here we are 15 years later. I'm a Hall of Fame speaker. I speak all over the world. But every year we take an off season, not to work in our business, but to work on our business. So the off season concept is a big part of what we do.
I like that a lot. Let's say that you got with a CEO of a company and they're always working, 12, 15, maybe sometimes 18-hour days. What do you say to get them to take some off time for their off season so they can reevaluate? What do you do there?
Well, I sell them on the benefits. We look at, as hard as we work, especially in America. Now, keep in mind, I've lived abroad. I've lived in Italy, Greece, and Germany. And these countries think we're crazy, the way we work here in America. In fact, when I was in Germany, the whole month of August, I think mostly all of Europe operates the same way. Everyone kind of goes on holiday. And it's like almost nobody working in August. And they really take their vacation and they get away, they travel, they go see the world. We don't do that in America, but, I don't see the benefit of us working so many hours. We're unengaged, we're frustrated. Alcoholism and obesity and divorce are at all-time highs because I think everybody's stressed out of control, and kind of overrun because, they didn't take an off season. So if I sat down with the CEO, and I've done this many times, initially they look at me and say, Walter, it's not realistic. I always got to work. My question is, are you busy or are you productive? And they get a little offended. And I was like, you work hard, but what's changing? What improvements has your organization made? And I'm about explosive growth. I don't want to be a guy who, just works hard and keeps everything the same. If you ask anybody who studied our company, every year we have considerable improvement. Every year, revenue is improved. Every year, we launch new products. Every year, we take our game to that next level because that's what I learned in sports. And so the off season is to our benefit to allow us to take whatever we do to the next level. And so not only is it applicable in sports, it's applicable in business, right? And so if you're competing in a very competitive industry, and imagine this, you take an off season and your competition doesn't, in a 12-month period, who's going to win? You know, because there's tons of ideas that companies have. There's tons of new product launches and websites that they want to do, but sometimes they can't ever quite get around to it because they're always putting out fires on a daily basis. If you go and watch a marching band, the conductor of the band is not on the field. The conductor of a band is perched up way in the sky so they can see the formation of the marching band. And since they can see the formation of the marching band, they can easily correct who's and what is online. To me, when you take an off season, you get off the front line and you're able to change your perspective on your business and look at it from an aerial view and figure out what do we need to do as an organization to make sure that we have exponential, explosive growth, you know, improve market share, and how can we do this on a continuous basis? To me, once I explain the benefit of an off season to a CEO, I have them hook, line, and sinker every single time.
I love that. When I work on my business, I try to take off one day a week to work on the business instead of just in it. And I guess the question is that enough?
Well, I mean, it all depends. You know, there's a million different ways to take an off season. You know, for our industry, training and development, you know, it kind of slows down. It doesn't stop. It slows down from Thanksgiving through the new year. So we have a natural, you know, off season kind of built in. Mm-hmm. And so most industries and companies have a little bit of a slow season. And to me, that's when you take your off season. You know, that's when you push back a little bit. And I do a session called The Power of What If. You know, for any innovator, for any company, I think you should always have those what if sessions. You know, you got employees at every level. And a lot of times, top CEOs, you know, and business leaders put all the pressure on themselves. You know, sometimes you can get an idea from a frontline person. You know, just because they don't have the same amount of degrees, just because they don't sign the payroll checks, they're in that office, they're in that building just like you every single day. And so they might have an idea, you know, that they've come up with based on how they engage the business. You know, you look at a restaurant, some of the new food items, you know, come from the servers that are actually fixing the food. It's just not coming from the head chef back at the corporate office. You know, they might have a client who comes in every day and orders the sub a certain way, and they taste it and the sub is amazing. Then they go to corporate and say, hey, we ought to make this sub. And before you know it, that employee on the front line had a huge impact on the direction of the company. So CEOs and business leaders have to be smart. I think you have to take a little time to get away from the rat race, to get off the front line just a little bit, and position your organization for explosive, exponential growth. I'm going to give you one business example of a company who didn't take off seasons, Maytag. Okay, about 10, 15 years ago, Maytag was the cat's meow in their space. Remember the commercial? You know, they had the Maytag repairman who was so bored because the machines were so good.
Yeah, he was.
So lonely. How do you go from? Yeah, he was lonely because our machines are amazing. Our machines are unstoppable. And they had a CEO come in. And I'm slipping, his name is slipping me right now. But he said, hey, we got to change the way we do business. And they ran him out of town. Newton, Iowa, the heartbeat of America. They ran him out of town because, hey, we're Maytag. We don't need to change how we do business. All the other manufacturers were going offshore, and they were building machines quicker, more efficient, and cheaper than what Maytag was building. And within a couple of years' time, Maytag was obsolete because their big machines could not compete with the competition. So if Maytag would have taken an off-season, they could have made the adjustments. But since they didn't, they got bought out by Whirlpool. They got bought out by their biggest competitor. That's like Pepsi coming to buy Coke. That should never happen, but it could if Coke doesn't take off seasons. So any business leader, I don't care where you are in the business, it doesn't matter where your market share is. If it ain't broke, break it. Because we always have to get bigger, stronger, and faster. Going back to sports, if you win a Super Bowl, if you win a world championship, your off season is still important because you want to come back and repeat the next year. And it's going to be tougher because everybody in their league is trying to kick your butt next year. So even though you won the championship, you can't rest on your laurels. You got to come into that next off season and work even harder in order to be a repeat champion. We rarely see repeat champions. Why? Because when you win a championship, if you don't make the right improvements and get better, even though you're number one, you still run the risk of being number two.
Excellent point. Now, when I look at your 31 truths, you've got obviously 31 truths of the think, execute, and dominate. They're all very important. But if you were on your deathbed, you had minutes to tell your best friend or your son or daughter or whatever, the most important one out of those, what would it be and why?
Well, let me say it this way. The new book we have is called Think, Execute, Dominate, the 31 Truths to Boost Peak Performance. If you really think about it, Andy, for us to be successful, we first have to think the right way. And we all know people who don't think the right way. A lot of parents are frustrated with their kids because they don't believe their kids are thinking the right way. So if you don't think the right way, you're kind of screwed in the beginning. And after you think the right way, you're still not off the hook. How many companies do we know fail to execute? The numbers are staggering of companies who actually execute on a daily basis the core principles of success. And so, but if I really boil down to my 31 truths, they're all good. They're all dynamic. They're all important. But if I had to pick one, here's the one I'm going to pick. I'm going to give you other examples so you have context. One of my peak performance truths are peak performers are accountable. You can't have performance improvement without accountability. How many business leaders have we seen point the finger, pass the buck, and before you know it, they've lost respect because of their integrity? To me, accountability is important to performance improvement. Some other of my truths are peak performers are committed to excellence. It's the difference in being that D student or the kid who's the A student. Sometimes a B is good enough, but the A student is committed to excellence, and they don't quit until they get the A. In fact, if they get a B, they're on suicide watch because they believe that they, are A-worthy. Okay, so I have a bunch of them. But the number one truth that I think is most important is that peak performers have a clear vision. You have got to know where you're trying to go before you begin the journey. When I grew up at 16, 17 years old, I had a dream and a vision to play professional sports. But when I was done playing professional sports, I wanted to make more money in business than I did in sports. Now, the question is, why do so many athletes struggle after their career is done? Here's why they struggle. They had no plan after their career. So as soon as they made it to the NBA and had the 10-year career, 12-year career, NFL, played 15 years, since they didn't have a clear vision that extended beyond their playing days, they're lost. They're stuck. They don't know what to do because the vision was incomplete. I am living the life I dreamt when I was 16 and 17 years old because I had a clear vision for my entire life. You see, when you have a clear vision for a company, a division, a department, or an organization, it's just like a family going on a trip. The kids get in the back seat, and they know they're going out of town to Disney World, or Disneyland, or Great Flags, and all the way, Andy, they're going to ask mom and dad, are we there yet? They're going to get excited. They're going to take naps. They're going to watch movies. But every once in a while, they're going to ask their mom and dad, are we there yet? The excitement, the anticipation of the journey is fulfilling, and they can't wait until they get there. I think that's what happens when we create a clear vision. Employee engagement is low right now in corporate America. Why? Because I don't think these employees know where we're headed. So they're not excited, and they don't even know what to ask about, are we there yet? Because the vision of the organization is not clear. All business leaders need to create a clear vision, but most importantly, they need to communicate it to their direct reports, who will communicate it to every employee in the building, including the lady or the guy who's in the warehouse or the workshop. They need to be able to ask the question, hey, Mr. CEO, are we there yet? And if you can create that dynamic inside of an organization, you won't have problems with employee engagement. You're going to have employees coming to work every single day excited because they understand they're headed someplace and they can't wait to get there.
That's awesome. That is really awesome. We've come to the end of our time, and I wish we could do like 3 or 4 more hours because I could sure listen to you keep going. Thank you so much for giving that information. The listeners are going to really eat that up. Now, how can someone learn more about you should they want to get your books, hear you speak, sign up for your coaching, etc.?
Very easy. My website for basically my B2B business, where I go and do keynotes and workshops for companies, is walterbond.com, just like James Bond. So walterbond.com. Our B2C website, where we serve entrepreneurs, fellow speakers with our coaching programs and products, is walterbondcoaching.com. I tell people all the time, as good as Michael Jordan was, he still had Phil Jackson. He had a coach. And if you go back and look at Tiger Woods, he was most successful as a golfer when he had good coaching. He right now is floundering, but he has not settled on a coach. I'm here to tell you, coaching is one of the most important professions in the world. Sometimes it's called mentoring. Sometimes we use different terms, but you have to have a coach. So we coach entrepreneurs and we coach fellow speakers and we teach them how to grow a business.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.